Good morning, everybody. Just a reminder, I'm Roger, your presenter today, and the topic we are covering today is trade finance, import and export facilities, trade cycle analysis and calculation of facilities. The agenda is as follows. I'll give a brief background on the ADB Trade Finance Program. Some of you may be aware of the program and how it works with banks, and I'll just explain that in a little bit more detail. Then we'll look at the benefits of trade to banks, all banks. Then the low risk characteristics of trade, which we've already covered in earlier sessions, so we can go through that fairly quickly, but I just want to keep bringing you back to that, because today when we look at trade facilities and trade products, we'll be taking full advantage of those low risk characteristics of trade. We'll then do a trade cycle analysis. And the reason we do a trade cycle analysis is so that we can then calculate the correct level of facilities that the customer requires to support his business. So Shahboz, I'll just let you quickly summarize that.
Okay. Hammaga assalomu alaykum. Bugun ko'rib turganlaringdek prezentatsiyamiz asosan savdoni moliyalashtirish, ya'ni trade finance bo'yicha. Ko'pchilik buni targoviy finansирование deb biladi. Asosan temasi buni import va eksportda ishlatiladigan imtiyozlar, o'sha savdoni sikl analizlari va o'sha imtiyozlarni kalkulyatsiyalari, ya'ni hisob kitobi bilan bugun tanishib o'tamiz va bugungi bizani agendada bor narsalar bu o'sha Osiyo taraqqiyot banki, ya'ni ADB savdoni moliyalashtirish programmasi haqida gaplashamiz va savdoni afzalliklari va qanaqangi riskni kamaytiradigan xarakteristikalar, savdo qanaqa tur riskni kamaytirish haqida ham gaplashib o'tamiz bugun. Va undan tashqari savdoni imtiyozlari va produktlari, o'sha savdoni sikl analizlari va o'sha imtiyozlarni kalkulyatsiyalari, ya'ni hisob kitoblari bo'yicha bugungi prezentatsiyamizda, seminarimizda gaplashib o'tamiz. Yes, Roger.
Thank you. So just very quickly, also a definition of trade finance. Finance provided by banks as a means of payment or guarantee of payment for international trade transactions. So two things to highlight there. First of all, it can be funded or unfunded. So the guarantee obviously relates to unfunded transactions, and trade finance relates to the funded side of the program. So the definition that we have here is the ADB definition, and it requires the transactions to be cross-border, in other words, to be international transactions. ADB doesn't support, under the program, does not support domestic transactions. And just a second point here, trade facilities and economic growth. It's a well-established fact that trade helps economies grow, and it's written into 7 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that were set by the World Bank, etc. And therefore, it just emphasizes the importance of trade, and that trade finance needs to be in place for economies to grow and to help alleviate poverty. So I'll just pass that back to you, Shahboz.
Okay. Bugungi o'sha mavzuimiz savdoni moliyalashtirish bo'lgani uchun birinchi o'sha savdoni moliyalashtirish o'zi nimaligi haqida qisqacha aytib o'tamiz. Bu savdoni moliyalashtirish o'sha xalqaro savdo tranzaksiyalariga bank tomonidan beriladigan to'lov yoki garantiya hisoblanadi. Savdoni moliyalashtirish deganda biz ikkita turni tushunamiz. Har doim birinchisi bu o'sha funded, ya'ni pul to'lanadigan, ikkinchisi unfunded, ya'ni to'lanmaydigan. Bu agar funded bo'lsa, bu asosan savdoni moliyalashtirish chasti kiradi. Agar unfunded, ya'ni to'lanmaydigan bo'lsa, bu har xil turdagi garantiyalar kirib o'tadi bunga. Va yana bunga qo'shimcha qilib aytib o'tish kerakki, to что Osiyo taraqqiyot banki asosan xalqaro savdo tranzaksiyalarini qo'llab-quvvatlaydi va Osiyo taraqqiyot banki tomonidan beriladigan moliyalashtirish, o'sha savdoni moliyalashtirishga beriladigan moliyalashtirish mahalliy savdoga kirmaydi, ya'ni faqat qo'llab-quvvatlashadi o'sha xalqaro savdo tranzaksiyalarini va bundan tashqari o'sha 17 Sustainable Development Goals degan hujjatda o'sha aytib o'tilgan, hamma o'sha savdoni moliyalashtirish, xalqaro savdoni moliyalashtirish haqidagi shartlar va qanaqangi nimalari bor, kelajakka planlari bor 2030-yilgacha o'shanda shu hujjatda aytib o'tilgan. Yes, Roger.
Thank you. So the trade finance program provides guarantees and loans through banks to support trade. There's close to 300 banks on the program these days. Guarantees and loans are turned around in 24 hours. The objective of the program is to fill market gaps. By that we mean where there is no commercial appetite, ADB steps in and provides the support or the catalyst to enable the transaction to go ahead. If there is no commercial appetite, then ADB helps to support the transaction. Ultimately, ADB would like to make itself redundant in the sense that we're very happy to be involved initially, but in the medium term, we're also very happy if the transactions continue without the need for ADB support. That is good news if that is the case. Obviously, there's a cost involved in involving ADB in the transaction. So if you're able to do the transactions in future without the need for ADB support, that's a good thing. And finally, strengthening the banking sector. The banks that tend to be very successful in international trade are the big global multinational banks. But we feel it's very important that local banks are also able to offer this product to their customers. And therefore, by ADB supporting the smaller local banks, that increases the level of competition in the marketplace and is a good thing for the consumer, for the customer, and for the economy in general. The more banks offering these products and services, the better. Thank you, Shakboz.
Bugungi asosan ko'rib turibsizlar, bu savdoni moliyalashtirish va savdo moliyalashtirish programmasi va uni asosiy maqsadlarini hozir aytib o'tamiz. ABRni, ya'ni Osiyo taraqqiyot bankini savdoni moliyalashtirish programmasi asosan garantiya va o'sha qarzlar, ya'ni moliyalashtirish, savdo uchun moliyalashtirish berib o'tadi. Hozirgi kunda 250 dan ortiq, ya'ni 300 atrofida partnyor banklari bor. Hozir ishlashyapti va garantiya va qarzlar 24 soat davomida beriladi. Buni asosiy maqsadlari nima bo'lishi mumkin? Ya'ni o'sha TFP program, ya'ni savdoni moliyalashtirish programmasining asosiy maqsadlaridan biri, bu birinchisi o'sha bozordagi bo'shliqni to'ldirish. Ikkinchisi bu TFP, ya'ni savdo moliyalashtirish programmasini ko'paytirish iloji boricha va undan tashqari uchinchisi bu bank sektorini mustahkamlash va bank sektorini bundan ham kuchaytirish. Bunda aytib o'tishimiz kerakki, hozirgi kunda xalqaro savdo uchun xalqaro savdoda banklarning roli juda ham katta va ko'pincha bu xalqaro savdoda ishtirok etayotgan banklar, bular xalqaro banklar hisoblanadi. Lekin ya'ni Osiyo taraqqiyot bankini podдержкасы bilan, ya'ni qo'llab-quvvatlashi bilan mahalliy va u darajada kuchli bo'lmagan o'rta darajadagi mahalliy banklar ham bu programmada qatnashib va xalqaro savdo tranzaksiyalarini amalga oshirishi mumkin. O'shaning uchun bu Osiyo taraqqiyot bankini savdoni moliyalashtirish programmasini foydalaridan bittasi. Yes, Roger.
Thank you. So a quick summary of the program. Two main components: credit guarantee. That's where ADB provides a guarantee to enable banks to confirm LCs. And revolving credit facility. That's where ADB provides foreign currency liquidity to banks so that they can lend foreign currency to their customers where they don't have foreign currency ordinarily available to them. For example, Japanese yen. You may not have Japanese yen. ADB can lend you Japanese yen, so you can lend to your customer. As I've mentioned, the number of banks, that's already covered. Limits depend upon the credit assessment. Typically, average tenor in the program is 100 days, but we can do transactions up to 3 years. Coverage is 100%. There's a list of all the trade products that are covered, LCs, both UCITS LCs, site LCs, UPAS LCs, standby LCs. Avalized bills, we'll cover that a little bit later, guarantees, discounting of LCs, trade loans and other instruments. And currencies currently covered by the program: US dollar, euro, yen, RMB, Australian dollar, New Zealand dollar. And there's no cost to join, and transaction fees are market-based. Okay, Shakboz?
TFP programma, savdoni moliyalashtirish programmasi, buni qisqacha TFP programmasi deb aytib o'tib ketaveraman. O'sha TFP programmasini asosan o'z ichiga nimalarni oladi? Mana bu slaydda ifodalab o'tilgan. Shu buni produktlari asosan birinchisi kredit garantiyalar va undan tashqari revolverniy kredit imtiyozlarini ham berib o'tadi. Ya'ni bu revolverniy kredit imtiyozlariga asosan chet el valyutasida kreditlar berish mijozlariga kiradi. Undan tashqari ya'ni qatnashuvchilar, bu programmada qatnashuvchilar 250 dan ortiq banklar hozirgi paytda TFP programmasida qatnashyapti. 300 ga yaqin banklar. Limitlari qanaqa bo'lishi mumkin? Kreditni baholashga qarab limitlar o'zgarib turadi. Bu programmada berilgan tenor bu 3 yilgacha, lekin o'rtacha tenor bu 100 kun atrofida hisoblanadi. Buni qamrovi 100% gacha qamrab oladi. Ya'ni 100% gacha o'sha berilgan tranzaksiyani 100% gacha bemalol moliyalashtirish berib o'tirishi mumkin. Qanaqangi turdagi tranzaksiyalarni amalga oshirish mumkin bu programmada? Albatta bu akkreditivlar, undan tashqari hisob kitoblarni o'sha avalizatsiya qilish, garantiyalar, diskount, trade loan, ya'ni savdo qarzlari va boshqa instrumentlar. Valyutalar, qaysi valyutalarda bu programmada ishlatiladigan valyutalar o'sha dollar, yevro, yen va Xitoy yuani, Avstraliya dollari va Yangi Zelandiya dollari hisoblanadi. Bu programmaga kirish, ya'ni bu programmada qatnashish qanaqadir narxi bormi deb aytilganda, bu programma hech qanaqangi narxi yo'q. Bemalol hamma qatnasha olishi mumkin, ya'ni hamma banklar. Va bu tranzaksiyalarni amalga oshiradigan xarajatlar o'sha bozordan bozorga ko'chib o'zgarib turadi. Yes.
Thank you. So without a program like this, smaller banks in developing less well-known countries would struggle to offer trade finance to their customers because their LCs would not be accepted internationally, and they would have trouble accessing foreign currency liquidity to be able to provide trade finance in foreign currencies. So it's vital to have a program such as this. Now, the importance of trade. What are the benefits of trade finance to banks? Why do banks offer this product? And I've listed a few reasons here why banks enjoy or will want to offer this product to their customers. One of the reasons is that trade is low risk. And remember that low risk is the 6 S's that we talked about in the other sessions. I'll cover those again briefly in a moment. But the low risk characteristics of trade make it low risk. But the good news is high returns. So trade finance generates a lot of revenues. And we have a product that is low risk but generates a lot of revenue. So from a bank perspective, obviously that is a very good thing. Also, the type of revenue that trade finance generates, a high proportion of fee income. In some cases, I've been able to get up to 60% of my annual income by way of fee income. Now, banks like fee income rather than interest income, because with interest income, they have to make a loan. They consume lots of capital when they make loans. There's always a risk the customer may not repay you. So fee income is preferred over interest income, and trade has a very high proportion of fee income. Shahbaz, I'll let you cover those first 2 points, and then I'll move on after that.
Okay. Asosan TFP programmasisiz, ya'ni Osiyo taraqqiyot bankining TFP programmasisiz kichkina banklar juda ham qiynaladi, ya'ni xalqaro tranzaksiyalarni amalga oshirish uchun, chunki akkreditivlari xalqaro standartlarga, xalqaro banklar yoki xalqaro tashkilotlar tomonidan ular chiqaradigan akkreditivlar qabul qilinmasligi mumkin. O'shaning uchun bizga ya'ni TFP programma kerak bo'ladi. Bu TFP programmasini asosiy muhim tomonlaridan bu bittasi, ya'ni foydali tomonlari hozir sanab o'tamiz. Bu albatta birinchisi riski juda ham kam va daromadi juda ham baland hisoblanadi. Ya'ni bu risk haqida keyingi slaydlarda gaplashib o'tamiz va undan tashqari o'sha to'lovdan olinadigan daromad, ya'ni har xil berilgan to'lovlardan olinadigan daromadlarni o'z ichiga qamrab boradi.
Next one is capital efficient. You recall that when we talked about standby LCs and bank guarantees, that some of them incurred 100% capital weighting, others incurred 50% capital weighting, financial versus non-financial. Same for LCs. LCs in some cases only consume 20% capital. So the point I'm making here is that you can do quite a lot of trade finance business with small amounts of capital. If you have only $100 of capital, you could use it all on an overdraft, $100 for $100 of overdraft, but you can do a lot more trade business. Maybe you can do $200 worth of trade business. So there is a leverage factor when you use your capital for trade products, and capital is a finite resource, capital being the bank's capital, which is defined as shareholders' funds and retained earnings. It's a finite resource, and so you want to be able to get the best possible returns from the amount of capital that the bank has available to it. Then we look at customers. Obviously, it's a good way to attract new customers by offering trade products. Many relationships I've started during my career through trade relationships. Even for existing customers, you can cross-sell trade to existing customers that are importing or exporting. More products you sell to your customers, the better. You don't want to have just 1 or 2 products to each of your customers. You'd rather have 4 or 5 or 6 products. And it builds stronger customer relationships because you have to gather a lot of information from the customer in order to put the facility in place. So that gets you a lot closer to the customer and builds a strong relationship with your customer. And as we said before, trade products help reduce the risk of fraud because they're much more secure than using open account or payment in advance TT transactions. So they help manage fraud risk. And finally there we have early warning signals. By that I mean in trade transactions there are lots of triggers, dates when things should happen, such as the loan should be repaid or the goods should be shipped or the LC expires. There are many triggers in trade finance, and if something doesn't happen, then you are alerted and you can then contact the customer to find out why that particular event did not occur. So that's a good thing again. So you're close to the customer and you know when something is not running as smoothly as you would hope. You are alerted to it because of the nature of the products with all of the various triggers that exist within the trade finance products. So Shahbaz, I'll let you cover that.
Okay. Bundan tashqari yaxshi foydalardan bittasi savdoni moliyalashtirishni bu capital effectiveness, chunki oldingi seminarlarda ko'rib o'tganimizdek bir ikkita har xil turdagi akkreditivlar bor. Bir xil turdagi akkreditivlar даже sizni o'sha kapitalingizni 100%ni даже ishlatish shart emas, 20%, 30% yoki 40% ishlatish mumkin. Ya'ni bu bilan aytmoqchimizki, agar sizni kapitalingiz $100 bo'ladigan bo'lsa, $100 orqali даже $200 savdoni moliyalashtirish tranzaksiyalarni amalga oshirish mumkin. Har xil turdagi produktlarni ishlatib va undan tashqari yangi mijozlar, ya'ni yangi turdagi produktlarni mijozlarga berib, ya'ni ko'rsatib yoki taklif qilib, o'shanda yangi mijozlarni привлекать qilish mumkin, jalb qilish mumkin, ya'ni bank o'ziga. Va undan tashqari o'sha hozirgi joriy muddatda bor bo'lgan ya'ni mijozlar bilan bemalol ishlab yangidan yangi imkoniyatlarni ochish mumkin va mijozlar bilan aloqani juda ham kuchaytirish mumkin, chunki bu turdagi produktlar va programmalar asosan juda ham xavfsiz hisoblanadi va undan tashqari o'sha firibgarlikni riskini anchagina kamaytirish mumkin. O'shanda foydali bo'ladi va undan tashqari o'sha oxirgi foydali tomonidan bittasi bu erta ogohlantirish signallari. Bir xil turdagi savdoni moliyalashtirish instrumentlarida har xil deadlinelar, ya'ni har xil o'sha muddatlar qo'yilgan bo'ladi va o'sha muddatdan oldin erta ogohlantirish signallari aytib o'tiladi bu programmada. Yes, Roger.
Okay, so trade is low risk, and it's low risk because of those 6 characteristics that we covered before. Security, which is the goods themselves. Wherever we can, we will use the goods in a trade transaction as security. Additional security to the normal security we may have from that customer. Trade transactions are short term. You can see from the earlier slide that the average tenor of the ADB portfolio is only 100 days. Some trade transactions may be only for a very few days, for 4 or 5 days. Some transactions can be obviously for much longer, but the shorter term from the bank's perspective, the better. Less can go wrong in a short period of time. Self-liquidating, a trade transaction, if structured properly, should be self-liquidating. In other words, when the customer sells the goods, the sales proceeds are used to repay the trade finance, and you should control the cash flow so that the cash flow does not go to another bank. Selective, the customer has to submit application forms or documents, and so we have the opportunity to review that application form or those documents before we support the transaction. If we don't like the transaction, for whatever reason, we can reject it. We see a good spread of transactions because customers' portfolios will not be made up of one single transaction, but will be made up of multiple transactions, multiple suppliers, multiple buyers. That reduces the risk again. If one transaction goes wrong, hopefully it will not kill the customer. And in order to take full advantage of all these low risk characteristics, we must make sure that the trade facility is specific. By that, I mean, when you grant the facility, it can only be used for trade. It cannot be used as an overdraft. It cannot be used as a loan. It cannot be used for other products. It can only be used for trade finance. And if you do that, then you have a very low risk product. Thank you, Shakboz.
Hozir risk tomonini gaplashib o'tamiz. Oldingi seminarlarda aytib o'tganimizdek, bizda 8 S bilan boshlanadigan riskni nima uchun kamaytiradigan savdoni moliyalashtirishda o'sha nima desam qonun qoidalar mavjud. Birinchisi o'sha, ya'ni savdo moliyalashtirish ishlatgan paytimizda juda ham xavfsiz bu, chunki bunda banklar bemalol hujjatlarni o'zlari ko'rib ko'rishi mumkin, qarab, ya'ni nima desam savdoda banklarni ishtiroki bo'lgani uchun bu xavfsiz hisoblanadi, banklar uchun ham, mijoz uchun ham. Undan tashqari qisqa muddatli va hamma narsa chunki o'sha moliya dunyosida nimaiki qisqa muddatli bo'lsa juda ham foydali bo'ladi chunki 2-3 yil yoki 4 yil 5 yil 6 yildan keyin hozirgi paytda ya'ni nima bo'ladi nima qo'yadi qanaqadir urush boshlanadimi yoki har xil mana hozirgi paytda pandemiyaga o'xshagan narsalar bo'ladimi bilib bo'lmaydi o'shaning uchun qisqa muddatli bo'lsa juda ham yaxshi va undan tashqari o'zini o'zi likvidatsiya qiladigan va undan tashqari o'sha selektiv ya'ni tanlov va kuchli bo'ladi ya'ni chunki qachonki o'sha banklar savdoni moliyalashtirish ya'ni TFP programmasini ishlatayotgan paytida bu orqali mijozlarni hujjatlarini mijozlarni bergan dokumentlarni bemalol ko'zdan kechirishi mumkin qarab ko'rib olishi mumkin va qanday turdagi hujjatlar ishlatilyapti o'shani hammasini ko'rish mumkin va undan tashqari o'sha hajmi ya'ni riskni kamaytiradigan turlardan bittasi bu hajmi hisoblanadi chunki bitta bu agarda savdoni moliyalashtirish programmasi ishlatilayotgan bo'lsa shu instrument orqali moliyalashtirish amalga oshirilayotgan bo'lsa unda nafaqat bittagina tranzaksiya orqali to'lov amalga oshiriladi balki bir nechta tranzaksiyalar orqali to'lov amalga oshiradi va agar o'shani ichidan bittagina tranzaksiya agar xato ketadigan bo'lsa bu mijozni unaqangi juda katta zararga tushirmaydi va bularni hammasini biz riskni kamaytirish uchun albatta biz ishonch hosil qilishimiz kerak что biz o'sha savdoni moliyalashtirish uchun bularni hammasini ishlatyapmiz agar overdraft yoki boshqa turdagi to'lovlar uchun ishlatayotgan bo'lsak ularga nima desam bunaqangi xavfsiz bo'lmasligi mumkin. Yes, Roger.
Thank you. Maybe just pause there to see if there are any questions. And a reminder that anybody that has any questions can enter them in the chat box.
Okay. Agarda qanaqadir shu paytgacha ko'rib o'tilgan slaydlarda savollaring bo'ladigan bo'lsa, bemalol savollaringni yozishinglar mumkin. Chat bor. O'sha chatga yozishinglar mumkin savollarni.
I assume no questions at this point.
Yes, Roger,
Yes.
no questions right now.
Okay.
We can continue.
Yep. All right. So now we're going to look then at import and export facilities. So basic questions we need to answer. First of all, what for? In other words, which products does the customer need? There are many different trade products. Is he importing? Is he exporting? Is it collections? Is it LCs? Does he need finance? So we need to know which products and at what point the customer needs finance from the bank. We need to know how long. How long is our exposure? Remember, we said trade transactions in some cases are only a week or two, 1 or 2 weeks in length. Sometimes they're 12 months in length. So we need to know how long the exposure is going to be for. And last but not least, we need to know how much the customer needs. Does he need 1 million? Does he need 2 million? Does he need 10 million? Who knows what is the right amount? We need to satisfy ourselves and the customer that we are giving him the correct amount of trade facility to support his business. So those are the basic questions. Shakboz?
Hozir endi keyingi slaydda biz gaplashib o'tamiz import va eksport imtiyozlari haqida, ya'ni import va eksportda savdoni moliyalashtirish, ya'ni TFP programmasini qanaqa ishlatish savollarida bularni boshlashimizdan oldin biz 3 ta savolni o'zimizga berishimiz kerak. Bu birinchisi nima uchun va qanaqangi produktlar mijozga kerak bo'lyapti, ya'ni qanaqangi turdagi produktlar mijozga kerak. O'shani bilishimiz kerak. U uchun birinchi o'sha mijozdan qanaqangi savdoni u amalga oshirmoqchi o'shani so'rashimiz kerak va undan tashqari biz o'sha qancha muddatga mijoz xohlaydi bu moliyalashtirishni va bu tranzaksiyalarni uzoqligi qancha muddat davom etadi o'shani ham bilishimiz kerak va undan tashqari qancha pul kerak, ya'ni mijozga, ya'ni o'sha biz gaplashayotgan mijozimiz biznesini yo'lga qo'yish uchun yoki biznesini o'sha rivojlantirish uchun qancha hajmdagi pul kerak va o'shani bilib o'tishimiz kerak. Yes, Roger.
We just lost you for a short while, or maybe it was only me, but hopefully everybody
Maybe,
got that.
yeah, maybe like I can recap or repeat
Yeah.
the translation. Yes.
Yes, just quickly. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Hozir ozgina texnik problemalar bo'ldi deyishyapti. O'shaning uchun yana bir marta qaytarib o'tiraman. Savdo imtiyozlari bu import va eksportda savdoni moliyalashtirishni ishlatish uchun birinchi o'sha 3 ta savolni biz o'zimizga berishimiz kerak. Ya'ni biz gaplashayotgan mijozga qanaqangi produktlar kerak, ya'ni o'sha mijozni talablarini qondirish uchun qanaqangi produktlar kerak va undan qancha muddatga bu kerak bo'ladi. Aytib o'tganimizdek, bir ikkita tranzaksiyalar даже bir hafta yoki 10 kun ichida tugaydi yoki 12 oy ichida tugashi mumkin. Va undan tashqari qancha hajmdagi moliyalashtirish unga kerak bo'ladi o'sha biz mijozimizga o'sha o'zini biznesini qo'yib yo'lga qo'yish uchun. Yes, Roger.
Thank you. So if we break it down into imports and exports and others, we can see that on the import side, the most common requirement will be for LCs or documentary credits, whether they be site LCs or usance LCs. The customer is importing using that payment method, he will need a facility from the bank. He may also need post-import finance. For site LCs, he may not have the cash flow to be able to pay immediately for the LC, so he may need some form of post-import finance to finance his working capital cycle. Another one is shipping guarantees. That shipping guarantees are required when the goods arrive before the documents and the transport company insists upon a guarantee to release the goods to the importer. So that may occur from time to time, hopefully just one-off, but not on a regular basis. But again, if the customer needs that, then he needs to have a facility. Avalization, we came across that word before. Avalization means co-acceptance of a bill of exchange. So a bill of exchange is normally drawn by the exporter demanding payment from the importer, and the importer is required to accept the bill of exchange. That's what we have in a collection. Remember, a DA or a DP collection. And in this case, not only the importer is accepting the bill, but the bank is also accepting the bill. So it's co-acceptance of the bill of exchange, co-acceptance. The bank also accepts the bill of exchange. Now, of course, if the bank does that, then the bank is equally liable with the customer. And so in that case, you would need to have a facility in order to accept the bill of exchange, a facility, import facility for your customer. So avalization, and then the last couple, we won't go into any detail today because they are supply chain products, but distributor finance for importing products, vehicles, machinery, that type of thing. Payables finance also for importers and providing finance to their suppliers, but they are supply chain products which are not part of this session today. So Shahbaz, I'll let you cover imports first.
Okay, Roger. Savdoni moliyalashtirishga imtiyozlarini hozir gaplashib o'tamiz va bu nima uchunligini aytib o'tamiz. Mana hozir slaydda ko'rib turibsizlar, 3 ta qismga bo'lingan. Bu birinchisi import imtiyozlari va qanaqangi importyorga va import tomonga qanaqangi imtiyozlar bo'lishi mumkin. Bu birinchisi o'sha imtiyozlari, bunda birinchisi akkreditivlar, ya'ni o'sha akkreditivlardan foydalanish mumkin import tomon. Undan tashqari importni amalga oshirib bo'lgandan keyingi moliyalashtirishdan foydalanish mumkin. Oldingi seminarlarda gaplashib o'tganimizdek, akkreditivlardan foydalangan paytimizda shunaqangi holatlar bo'ladiki, o'sha import qilinganidan keyin birorta mahsulotlar import qilinganidan keyin importyor tomonidan olinadigan qarzlar, ya'ni moliyalashtirishlar bunga kiradi va undan tashqari shunaqangi holatlar bo'lishi mumkin. Bu o'sha mahsulotlar bir ikkita holatlarda to'lovdan oldin keladi va bu juda ham kam uchraydigan holat va bunda o'sha shipping guarantees deydi, ya'ni o'sha yetkazib berish garantiyalari deyiladi va undan tashqari avalizatsiyalar haqida biz oldin ham gaplashib o'tdik bu haqida va o'sha bitta aytib o'tamiz, ya'ni to'lanadigan payable finance, ya'ni to'lanadigan moliya qismi ham bo'lib o'tadi va importyor tomonga.
Thank you. So then export facilities, and we break those down into two broad categories, pre-shipment and post-shipment. You'll recall that when we looked at LCs, we talked about red clause credits and the fact that they are pre-shipment finance for the exporter, but the risk taker for a red clause LC is the issuing bank and the LC applicant. So actually you don't need a facility for a red clause credit if you're on the export side. Obviously you do on the import side. But the more common type of pre-shipment finance would be packing credits. Packing credits are where you provide finance to an exporter for him to purchase raw materials or to provide him with working capital to manufacture the goods before he goes ahead and ships the goods. And they are generally made against the LC themselves. We'll look at that in a little bit more detail later on. Post-shipment finance is probably the least risky form of trade finance because we are, or the bank is just basically collecting payment on behalf of the customer. So whether the transaction is under LC or not under LC, post-shipment finance is provided to the customer against letters of credit, negotiations. There may also be a need for a confirmation potentially. So negotiations or discounting, same thing. And then for non-LC transactions, which are documentary collections, then we can also look to provide finance for DA and DP bills to exporters as they await payment under those transactions. They would be a with recourse facility. Remember, with recourse is in the event that payment is not made, we can ask for the money back. And a couple of other specialized types of export facility, forfeiting and factoring. Forfeiting is larger, one-off, longer-term transactions. They can be structured using trade products and accessing the secondary market. Forfeiting is where actually you find an investor, a secondary market player that is willing to take the risk of the transaction on. And so that is a specialized form of trade finance, which we will not have time to go into today. Factoring tends to be more domestic, can be cross-border, but tends to be more domestic, smaller, short-term transactions and financing a customer's sales ledger or sales receivables through factoring, purchasing invoices from a customer who is selling locally or potentially cross-border. And then receivables financing, which is another one of the SCF products, supply chain finance products, which we won't cover today. But that just gives you some idea of the various export facilities. Then the other products, we looked at back-to-backs in the case study last week and transferables. We looked at those in detail last week. Standby LCs as well. You know, for transferable LCs that the customer doesn't need a facility if he's a middleman. And then the last one, bid and performance bonds. Obviously, if a customer needs bid or performance bonds, whether you issue them as SBLCs or you issue them as guarantees, the customer would need to have a facility with the bank. But they're probably more one-off in nature as opposed to ongoing permanent facilities. Shakboz, to you.
Eksportyorga bo'ladigan qulayliklar hozir gaplashib o'tamiz. Bu birinchisi o'sha ya'ni o'sha mahsulotlarni jo'natishdan oldingi moliyalashtirish. Bu o'sha birinchisi bo'lishi mumkin. Akkreditivlar orqali akkreditivlar orqali moliyalashtirishni qabul qilib olishi mumkin. Ya'ni o'tgan safargi seminarlarda gaplashib o'tganmiz. O'sha ya'ni agar eksportyor xohlasa, eksportyor ya'ni pulni, ya'ni to'lovni birdaniga olaman desa, o'sha berilgan protsentni stavkasini to'lab turib, bankka bemalol pulni o'zi qabul qilib olishi mumkin. O'shalar kiradi va mahsulotlarni jo'natgandan keyingi moliyalashtirish bu bunga kirishi mumkin. O'sha akkreditivlar asosan bunga kiradi. Ya'ni agar eksportyor o'sha berilgan stavkani to'lamasdan to'lovni o'sha berilgan muddatda qabul qiladigan bo'lsa, unda mahsulotlarni jo'natgandan keyin to'lovni o'ziga qilinadigan to'lovni importyor tomonidan qabul qilib olish mumkin. Va undan tashqari bizda boshqa turdagi moliyalashtirishlar bor. Bu o'sha forfeiting, ya'ni forfeiting asosan uzoq muddatli tranzaksiyalarga amalga oshiradi va o'sha har xil produktlarni, ya'ni har xil mahsulotlarni savdoda ishtirok etish uchun asosan ikkilamchi bozorda, ya'ni bunda asosan o'sha investor izlanadi, o'sha ikkilamchi bozorda. Va undan tashqari bizda factoring bor. Factoringda bu asosan mahalliy bozordagi qisqa muddatdagi tranzaksiyalar amalga oshiriladi o'sha invoyslar orqali. Va undan tashqari o'sha debtorlik moliya tomonlari bor. Bunda asosan ishlaydi o'sha logistikaga oid moliyalashtirish turlari ishlaydi va bu haqida keyingi seminarlarimizda gaplashib o'tamiz. Va bundan tashqari boshqa produktlar ham bor. Bular o'sha back to back akkreditivlar, transfer akkreditivlar, standby akkreditivlar va o'sha standby akkreditivlar va garantiyalar hisoblanadi boshqa produktlar. Yes, Roger.
Thanks, Shahboz. Was there a question? I saw somebody maybe raise a hand. Just can you check if there is a question?
Agar savollar bo'lsa, qanaqadir bemalol savollar berishlari mumkin.
If not, we'll move on. We can always come back if there is a question.
We're good, Roger, to move on.
Okay. So that answered the first question. What are the products and what does the customer need the facility for? The second question and third question, we need to look at the trade cycle. So to answer the questions how long and how much, we need to analyze the customer's trade cycle. Now the trade cycle is a timeline and it looks something like this. So this is an example of a trade cycle. I've just used this one to demonstrate to you what it would look like. If a customer were using LCs and importing using site LCs, he would come to the bank with an LC application and the bank would review the application, make sure there's a limit available, make sure the goods are the normal goods, make sure the goods are insured, see whether they have control over the goods, see who the beneficiary is, make sure there's no compliance issues. So a few things that the bank will check before it goes ahead and issues the LC. But assuming everything is in order, the bank will go ahead and issue the LC. Now, what happens next? From the importer's perspective, from the import bank's perspective, from your customer's perspective, if he's the importer, what happens next is documents arrive sometime in the future. In this example, I'm saying documents arrive after 30 days and are released after 30 days. So obviously when you receive the documents under an import LC, you check them for compliance with the LC terms and conditions, make sure there are no discrepancies. If there are no discrepancies, then you have to go ahead and pay under the LC. The issuing bank has the primary obligation to pay under an LC. And if documents are in order, it must pay. So in this example, we have 30 days between when the LC is issued and when the import documents arrive and the import documents are released to the customer, 30 days. Now at this point, the customer may not have sufficient working capital to pay for those documents. So he may ask the bank to provide some form of finance to cover his manufacturing process or his stock holding period. So some customers may be manufacturing work in progress, raw materials, finished goods. Other customers may just be holding finished goods and waiting to sell them. In this example, we're saying the customer has a stock holding period of 30 days. So that would go from when he clears the goods, takes the goods into his possession, until the time that he sells the goods at day 60. That is when he sells the goods, then his stock period is over because he has then created a sale and a receivable. So in this case, we have 30 days receivables, local sales. So he's not actually exporting, he's just selling locally into the market. And he gives his buyers 30 days in which to settle and pay him. So this customer's trade cycle is 90 days long. 30 days from the time he establishes the LC to when the documents arrive, then a further 30 days of stock holding period, and then he sells the goods, and then a further 30 days until he receives the sales proceeds. Shahboz, I'll let you cover that.
Hozirgi paytda o'sha savdo bu nima slaydda savdoni siklini ko'rib o'tamiz. Ya'ni savdo qanaqa ishlaydi va qancha muddat davom etadi o'sha bitta tranzaksiyani amalga oshirish. Ya'ni ko'rib turibmiz slaydda bu birinchisi, ya'ni bir qilib belgilangani o'sha birinchi kun, ya'ni biz hozir importyor bank tomonidan qarab o'tamiz. Ya'ni bizni mijozimiz hozir importyor va bizni bankimizga keldi va o'sha o'zini amalga oshirmoqchi bo'lgan tranzaksiyasi haqida bizga murojaat qildi va unda birinchi qilinadigan narsa o'sha akkreditiv, agar akkreditiv ishlatadigan bo'lsa, unda akkreditivni chiqarish. Ya'ni akkreditivni chiqarish uchun albatta biz o'sha 30 kun vaqt berdik. Ya'ni 30 kun ichida biz o'sha berilgan hujjatlarni tekshirib o'tamiz. Qanaqangi mahsulotlar import qilyapti, importyor kim, importyor bank qanaqa va qanaqa hajmdagi summani, qanaqa summadagi mahsulotlarni import qilyapti, o'shalarni ko'rib o'tishimiz kerak. Va o'sha 30 kundan keyin qilinadigan ish bu o'sha hujjatlar importyor tomonidan kelib berilgan, importyor bank tomonidan so'ralgan hujjatlar hammasi keladi va hammasi tekshirib o'tiladi va hammasi tekshirib o'tilgandan keyin 30 kun ichida o'sha akkreditiv chiqariladi. Ya'ni akkreditiv chiqarilgandan keyin yana biz o'sha 30 kun muddat kutiladi o'sha mahsulotlarni ishlab chiqarish uchun, ya'ni qanaqa berilgan mahsulotlarni ishlab chiqarish uchun, yoki agar importyor tayyor mahsulotlarni import qiladigan bo'lsa, unda o'sha 30 kun ichida mahsulotlarni saqlash muddati va 30 kun ichida keladi mahsulotlar va saqlab o'sha mijoz o'zini nimasiga desam endi o'sha mijoz mahsulot importyor mahsulotlarni qabul qilib oladi va savdo o'sha mahsulotlarni o'zini biznesini yo'lga qo'yish uchun, ya'ni savdoni boshlash uchun tayyorgarlik ko'radi va agar bu muddatda mijozni, agar o'sha mahsulotlar kelishidan oldin mijozni importyorga agar puli bo'lmaydigan bo'lsa, o'sha bankdan moliyalashtirish so'rashi mumkin va bularning hammasi o'sha ya'ni keyingi 30 kun ichida amalga oshiriladi va undan keyingi 30 kun, ya'ni o'sha 60 kun muddatda o'sha mahsulotlar o'sha yetib keladi, yoki agar importyor mahsulotlarni ishlab chiqaradigan bo'lsa 30 kun ichida mahsulotlar ishlab chiqariladi va o'sha mahsulotlarni sotishni boshlaydi va keyingi 30 kun davomida o'sha mahsulotlar hammasi sotiladi va sotilgandan keyin o'sha sotilgandan keyin o'sha sotgan mahsulotlariga pulni qabul qilib olishni boshlaydi, ya'ni sotgan mahsulotlarni pulini qabul qilib olishni boshlaydi. Ya'ni bu savdo siklida ko'rib turibmizki, bu savdo sikli 90 kun davom etdi. Yes, Roj.
Thank you. So we could say the import line is 60 days long, which covers the LC issuance to the time the documents are received, the lead time, 30 days, plus then 30 days of trade loan between day 30 and day 60 when the customer needs finance from the bank. So the length of the import cycle is 60 days, and then we have 30 days for the exports, or in this case, local sales, receivables. So a 30-day finance period. And just for interest, when we look at this, we could say that the first 30 days of the transaction, we have control of the goods if we have a full set of bills of lading called for under the LC. So the first 30 days would be where the bank has control of goods. But then when the bank releases the documents to the customer on day 30, then the import cash line kicks in from day 30 through to day 60. And then local sales will also be without the benefit of transport documents. So then it would be an export cash line. So it's important to recognize during the trade cycle at what point you have control of goods, because control of goods means security over the underlying goods. You don't have it all the time, you only have it some of the time. So Shahbaz, I will summarize by saying import line needs to be 60 days in this case, and the export line needs to be 30 days. To you?
Bu anaqa savdo siklini oxirini ya'ni qisqa qilib aytganda o'sha import liniya, ya'ni importyor tomonidan qilinadigan ishlarni hammasi, amalga oshiriladigan ishlarni hammasi o'sha 60 kun davom etishi kerak va eksportyor tomonidan qilinadigan ishlarni hammasi 30 kun davom etishi kerak va buni umumiy qilib aytganda o'sha bu savdo sikli 90 kun davom etyapti hozirgi paytda. Ya'ni importyor tomonidan qilinadigan ishlar bu o'sha akkreditivga zaпрос, ya'ni akkreditivga zaпрос topshirish bankka va chiqishi, hujjatlarni yetkazib berish va akkreditiv amalga oshirilib va eksportyor bankka jo'natilishi, bularni hammasi o'sha 60 kun ichida davom etsa, agar eksportyor tomonidan parallelni bo'linadigan ishlar, ya'ni mahsulotlarni tayyorlash, mahsulotlarni jo'natish va hammasi bilan 30 kun ichida davom etishi kerak va umumiy 90 kunni o'z ichiga olish kerak. Yes, Roger.
So this answers our second question, how long? So one question remaining, how much? Now, we need the following information to calculate the amount of the facility. We need to know the customer's annual sales turnover, his gross profit margin, his cost of goods, his annual purchases, raw materials or finished products, depending on type of business. We need to know his supplier's payment method and credit terms. We need to know his stock holding period or his manufacturing cycle. And we need to know his buyer's payment methods and credit terms. Shahbaz?
Hozirgacha o'sha ikkita savolga javob berib o'tdik. Ya'ni birinchisi qanaqangi produktlar ishlatilishi va qancha muddatni bu tashkil etadi. Va uchinchi savolimizga javob berish uchun mana hozir keyingi mana bu slaydda ko'rib o'tishimiz mumkin. Ya'ni o'sha bu berilgan qulayliklar yoki imtiyozlarni qanaqa qilib turib hisoblashimiz uchun quyidagi informatsiyalar bizga kerak bo'ladi. Ya'ni bu birinchisi yillik savdo aylanmasi, undan tashqari yalpi foyda darajasi va o'sha sotilgan mahsulotlarning tannarxi va undan tashqari o'sha yillik xarid bizga kerak bo'ladi va yetkazib beruvchilarning to'lov usullari va kredit shartlari, mahsulotlarni saqlash muddati yoki ishlab chiqarish sikli, ya'ni qancha muddatda ishlab chiqariladi va bu oxirgisi o'sha sotib oluvchining to'lov usuli va kredit shartlarini biz bilishimiz kerak bo'ladi. O'sha berilgan qulayliklar yoki imtiyozlarni hisoblab chiqishimiz uchun. Yes.
Okay, so here's the information. In this case, the customer's sales turnover is 1.5 million. His gross profit margin is 20%. Therefore, his cost of goods sold would be 80% of the 1.5 million, which equals 1.2 million. Annual purchases are 50% of the COGS, cost of goods sold. So 50% of 1.2 million is 600,000. The supplier's payment methods was an LC, and it was site. You were given that back in the trade cycle. There we go, site LC, issued on day 1. Stock holding period also given in the trade cycle of 30 days. And the buyer's payment method and credit terms were given as being local sales 30 days. So now we have all of the information we need in order to be able to calculate the amount of the facility. Shahboz, I'll let you cover that.
quyidagi ma'lumotlar berib o'tilgan, ya'ni o'sha bizni mijozimizni o'shani bizni mijozimizni o'sha qilayotgan savdosini qulayliklari yoki imtiyozlarini hisoblash uchun bizga quyidagi ma'lumotlar berilgan. Ya'ni yillik savdo aylanmasi bu 1,5 million va yalpi foyda darajasi 20%, sotilgan mahsulotlarning tan narxi bu o'sha 80%, ya'ni 1,2 million va yillik xarid bu o'sha sotilgan mahsulotlarni 50%ni tashkil etadi, ya'ni 600 ming bo'lyapti va undan tashqari yetkazib beruvchining to'lov usuli va kredit shartlari o'sha berilgan akkreditivda ko'rsatib o'tilgan va o'sha undan tashqari mahsulotlarni saqlash muddati yoki ishlab chiqarish muddati bizga o'sha 30 kun berib o'tilgan va sotib oluvchining to'lov usuli va kredit shartlarini ko'rib chiqish uchun ham 30 kun bizga berib o'tilgan. Mana bu berilgan informatsiyalar orqali biz hozir hisoblab chiqamiz qanaqangi qulayliklar yoki imtiyozlar biz o'zimizni mijozimizga beryapmiz. Yes, Roger.
Right. So we can now do the calculation for the imports. So the purchases figure was 600,000, you'll recall. The period that the site LC is outstanding for is 30 days, given in the trade cycle. So 30 over 360, 360 representing 1 year. So this shows that the customer needs a site LC facility of 50,000. This is assuming that he will issue an LC every month for 50,000, covering his annual purchases of 600,000. So 50,000 per month requires a facility of 50,000. Then the stock holding period, in this case it's the same because it's also 30 days and he needs finance from the bank, so he will need a trade loan, trade finance loan for 30 days, which takes him from when the documents arrive at day 30 through to when he sells the goods on day 60. He needs finance from the bank, so we can give him a trade finance loan. Calculation is exactly the same in this case. 600,000's worth of purchases. The trade loan is 30 days long. 30 days over 360 equals a trade loan of 50,000. So we can add those two together. He has an LC requirement of 50,000 and he has an import trade loan requirement of 50,000. His total import line is 100,000. Shahboz, I'll let you cover that first.
Importyor uchun import uchun qulayliklar bu birinchisi o'sha ko'rib turibmiz yillik savdo aylanmasi, ya'ni yillik savdo aylanmasini biz amalga oshirish uchun bunda akkreditiv ishlab chiqarishimiz kerak. Ya'ni bizda hozir hisoblagan paytimizda yillik savdo aylanma yillik xarid bizda hisoblagan paytimizda hisoblab ko'rgandik. To что yillik xarid bu 50% sotilgan mahsulotlarning tan narxiga teng. Ya'ni bu degani bizda sotilgan mahsulotlarni tan narxi va unda hisoblab chiqqandik bu 600 mingga teng bo'lganda, ya'ni yillik xaridimiz 600 mingga teng bo'ladigan bo'lsa, ya'ni bir yilda biz 600 minglik mahsulot sotib oladigan bo'lsak, unda akkreditiv ishlab chiqarish uchun o'sha 30 kun muddatimiz ketadigan bo'lsa, unda o'sha 30 ga ko'paytirib 360 ga bo'lamiz va bizda 50 ming chiqadi va 50 ming biz har oy 12 oy davomida biz har oy 50 mingdan akkreditiv chiqarib kelishimiz kerak o'sha nimamizga mijozimizda biznesda yurib turishi uchun. Va undan tashqari mahsulotlarni saqlash muddati yoki ishlab chiqarish muddati uchun bizda yana bu 30 kunni tashkil etgandi va o'shaning uchun bunga ham 600 ming hisoblagandik. O'sha 600 mingni 30 ga ko'paytiramiz va 360 ga bo'lyapmiz, ya'ni 50 ming chiqyapti. Ya'ni 50 ming mijozimiz uchun savdo qarzi kerak bo'ladi, chunki u mahsulotlarni ishlab chiqarish uchun. Va umumiy import liniyasi biz umumiy beradigan import liniyamiz 100 mingni tashkil etyapti bu ikkalasini hisobga olganda. Yes, Roger.
Then we can move to the export side, and the information we have there is that the sales are 1.5 million and the credit terms are 30 days. So now we use the sales figure to finance the receivables or the exports. 1.5 million multiplied by 30, because it's 30 days long as per the trade cycle, over 360. He would require a 125,000 line, export line, to support his sales, done on a monthly basis. So the total export cash line would total 125,000. So that's the 1.5 million multiplied by 30 days, because that's how long the receivables are outstanding for, over 360 equals 125,000 of export line. So the total requirement for this customer is 100,000 for imports, including the cash line of 50,000, and 125,000 for the sales of the receivables, are covering his local sales to his buyers locally. So Shekboz, I'll let you complete that.
Export liniyasi bitta ko'rib turibsizlar, yillik ya'ni yillik savdo bu 1.5 millionga teng bo'lyapti bizda va kredit shartlariga ko'ra 30 kunni tashkil etyapti va o'sha 1.5 millionni 30 ga ko'paytirib 360 ga bo'lyapmiz va bizda 125 ming kelib chiqyapti va eksport liniyasi 125 mingga teng bo'lyapti. Bunda ko'rib turibsizlar, bu mijoz uchun umumiy qilib aytganda import liniyasi 100 ming va eksport liniyasi 125 ming kerak bo'lyapti. Yes, right.
Okay, so let me just pause there to see if there are any questions or whether you would like me to go over any of that again. The reason we are doing this is to establish what is the correct amount of facility for the customer. Because if the customer walked in the door and said, I need a facility of 500,000, how do you know if that is right or wrong? We need to be able to go through this exercise to validate the amount that the customer is asking for, or to calculate it if he doesn't know what the correct amount is, to help him calculate the amount that he actually needs. So it's an important exercise to make sure we give the customer the right amount of facility. Shekboz?
O'sha keyingi slaydlarga o'tishimizdan oldin agar siz qanaqadir savollaringiz bo'lsa savollaringizni berish mumkin, chunki biz buni qaytadan so'rayotganimiz sababi agarda qanaqadir tushunmovchiliklar bo'ladigan bo'lsa hozir bemalol so'rab olishlari mumkin, chunki o'sha berilgan mijozga biz hisob kitob qilgan paytimizda oxirida kerakli summani va kerakli narxni ayta olishimiz uchun. Yes, Roger. Agar savollar bo'lsa bemalol berishlari mumkin.
Any questions? No?
So we have one question about the back-to-back LCs. So I'm going to be providing this guy the previous slides, previous seminars, the
Okay.
slides of seminars. Okay, so.
Okay. Yep. Sure.
Okay, so
Yep.
let me just tell him shortly. Saidnazar aka, assalomu alaykum. Savol bergan ekansiz back-to-back akkreditivlar haqida. Oldingi o'tgan seminarlarimizda buni aytib o'tgandik. O'shaning uchun agar xohlasangiz pochta email manzilingizni mana shu nimaga chatga yozib qoldirsiz yoki menga yozib yuborsangiz, men sizga oldingi slaydni, oldingi o'tgan seminarimizni tashlab yuboraman. Bemalol back to back LC'ni umumiy qilib tushuntirilgan, qanaqa ishlashi hammasi detalli tushuntirilgan. Yes, Roger. You can continue.
So if there are no questions on the calculation of facilities, what we can now do is to give you the chance to calculate facilities for yourself. And we have two exercises. One of them is called Very Lucky, and the second one is called Slim Skirts. Please, you should have had these provided to you along with the presentation materials, but I'll put it up on the screen anyway. But please have a look at Very Lucky first and calculate the import facility required by Very Lucky. And then once we've done Very Lucky, we'll have a look at the second one, which is Slim Skirts. But we'll do Very Lucky first, and then we'll go over it together, and then you can have the chance to have a second exercise with Slim Skirts. So let's start with Very Lucky. I will put up the screen if you just give me a second. Hopefully you can see that. So Very Lucky imports chemicals and raw materials from Russia and Singapore. Finished product is sold to local buyers in the rest of Asia on open account terms. You're given the sales figure of 6 million, got a profit margin of 20%. VL's raw materials amount to 80% of the cost of goods sold. The Russian supplier supplies on open account terms, but the Singaporean requires Very Lucky to open documentary credits or LCs. 50% of the products comes from Russia, 50% comes from Singapore. An analysis of VLE's Very Lucky's financials reveal that the company's stock holding and work in progress periods are as follows: 105 days, made up of 60 days raw materials, 15 days work in progress, and 30 days finished goods. Then the VL finance the production cycle by way of a trade loan, so they need finance from the bank. And it takes on average 2 months from the time the LC is established until the receipt of documents. So that's the LC lead time. And LCs always call for a full set of bills of lading made out to the shipper's order and endorsed in blank. So Very Lucky's practice is to request release of documents on arrival so they can clear the goods and commence the manufacturing. And you are required to calculate the import facility appropriate to support Very Lucky's trade cycle. So hopefully you all have access to this and you can understand this. I'll let you go through it. I think you'll need around 10 minutes to do this. And then once 10 minutes is up, we'll go over it together with the solution. Any questions before I pass it to you?
Sure. So far, there is no questions, I guess. Roger, maybe let me actually briefly translate this into Uzbek, okay, in our language, in order to people to understand what is actually about this.
Sure.
Maybe you prefer me to translate it later in written form and just provide to our members who are actually participating in the seminar. What do you think?
I think you can do both. I think maybe just explain it to them now, just in case they need help with the translation to do the exercise. But yeah, to give it to them in Uzbek language afterwards is also a very good idea.
Okay, no problem. Okay.
I'll let you translate it, and then we'll go back in 10 minutes.
Okay. Bizda case study berilgan, ikkita case study. Birinchisi o'sha Very Lucky degan kompaniya, ikkinchisi Slim Skirts Exercise degan kompaniya. O'sha birinchisida VLE bu berilgan kompaniyaning nomi, ya'ni VLE ximический mahsulotlar import qiladi Rossiyadan va Singapurdan va ximический mahsulotlar ishlab chiqaradi. Va keyin ishlab chiqarilgan mahsulotlar mahalliy sotib oluvchilarga sotiladi va qolganlari o'sha Osiyoni boshqa Osiyodagi boshqa sotib oluvchilarga sotiladi. O'sha hisob ochish shartlari orqali. O'sha ko'zda tutilgan savdo berilgan o'sha ko'zda tutilgan savdo shu yilga 6 millionni tashkil etadi mahalliy valyutada va yalpi foyda darajasi 20% ni tashkil etadi bitta. Va bundan tashqari o'sha bu kompaniyani savdosini qo'llab-quvvatlash uchun turli xil muzokaralar olib borildi VLE bilan va quyidagi informatsiyalar berildi. O'sha VLEni mahsulotlarini o'sha berilgan mahsulotlarni o'sha sotilgan mahsulotlarning tannarxini 80% ni tashkil etilishi ko'zda tutildi va Rossiyadagi sotuvchi, ya'ni Rossiyadagi eksportyor VLEni o'sha hisob ochish shartlari orqali mahsulotlarni yetkazib berishga tayyor, lekin singapurlik eksportyor VLEdan so'rayapti o'sha agressivlarni ishlatish orqali to'lovlarni amalga oshirishini. Rossiya va Singapurdan keladigan mahsulotlar 50-50, ya'ni 50% Rossiyadan, 50% Singapurdan keladi. Va o'sha VLEni analitiklar, finansiy analitiklarni qilgan analizlarga asosan o'sha ya'ni 105 kunni tashkil etadigan bu, ya'ni o'sha mahsulotlarni tayyorlab sotish uchun, ya'ni 60 kunda keladigan o'sha Rossiya va Singapurdan keladigan ya'ni raw materials, ya'ni materiallar keladigan bo'lsa va uni ishlash uchun 15 kun tashkil etadi va mahsulotlarni tayyor holatga keltirish uchun 30 kunni tashkil etyapti. O'shaning uchun ya'ni VLE bu importni amalga oshirish uchun savdo qarzini ishlatmoqchi. O'rtacha bu 2 oy muddatni tashkil etadi, ya'ni o'sha aggressiv ochishdan boshlangan 2 oy muddatni tashkil etadi. Ya'ni VLE bizda hozir so'rayapti o'sha hujjatlarni chiqarishni, o'sha mahsulotlar kelishi bilan hujjatlarni chiqarib yuborishdi. O'shaning uchun keyin bu orqali o'zini ishlab chiqarishini tezlashtirish uchun va bizdan hozir so'ralyapti o'sha VLE bergan javobga qarab proposal tayyorlab o'tishimiz kerak. O'sha import qulayliklarini, ya'ni bu VLEni anaqasini savdo muddatini hisoblab chiqadigan import qulayliklarini ko'rsatib o'tishimiz uchun. So Roger, I've actually translated it and we're going to give some more minutes to our members to actually analyze it, okay?
Yep, that's fine. Okay. Okay, just give you 1 or 2 more minutes and then we'll go over this one.
Yana 2 minut vaqt beramiz. O'shandan keyin agar javoblaring bo'lsa, chatga bemalol yozishlaring mumkin. Berilgan savollarga javoblaring bo'lsa.
Okay, should we go over it?
Yes, we can go.
So, here we go. So we're told that the sales are 6 million. The first thing we need to do is calculate the purchases figure. So you're told then that the gross profit margin is 20%. So 80% is cost of goods. So 80% of 6 million would be 4.8 million.
So Roger, can I go over it like one by one?
Yes.
If it is
Yes.
possible. Yes.
Yes. Okay. So let me just come to the first number first, and then,
Yes,
you
yes.
can go over it. So I'll just start again. So sales are 6 million, and gross profit margin is 20%. Therefore, the cost of goods is 80% of 6 million, which equals 4.8 million. Now, the purchases are 80% of the cost of goods figure. So the raw materials to be imported is 3.84 million. Okay, I'll leave that to you, Shahboz, to go over that part.
Okay. Bizda hozir o'sha ko'zda tutilgan savdo, ya'ni sotuv bu mahsulotlarni 6 million hisoblanyapti. Va undan keyin sales va undan keyin bizda o'sha yalpi foyda darajasi 20% tashkil etyapti. 20% tashkil etyapti hozir paytda. So Roger, after the gross profit margin of 20%, so the purchase was 80%, right?
4.8 million, and then the purchases is 80% of that figure. So the calculation is effectively, the first calculation to arrive at 3.84 is 6 million multiplied by 80% multiplied by 80%.
Okay. Bizga mana hozir 3.84 million keltirilgan, ya'ni o'sha materiallarni import qilish uchun ishlatiladigan summa bu hisoblandi. Bizda 6 million ko'paytirilgan o'sha 80% va uni ham 80% topgan paytimizda o'sha 3.84 million hisoblandi bizda. So yes, Roger, next one.
So then in this case 50% is coming from Singapore and 50% from Russia. The 50% from Russia is on open account, so we can disregard that. What we are calculating is the trade facility, so that's where the LC is required. So 50% under
Yes.
LC of the purchases would equate to 1.92 million.
Ya'ni o'sha keladigan materiallarni import bo'ladigan materiallarni 50% Rossiyadan, 50% Singapurdan kelyapti va 50% Rossiyadan keladigani bu hisob raqami ochish orqali kelyapti. O'shaning uchun ya'ni akkreditiv ishlatilyapti. O'shaning uchun biz buni ya'ni 50% olib tashlaymiz. Ya'ni 3.84 50% olib tashlaymiz va o'sha 50% Singapurdan keladigan materiallarni nimasi summasi bizda bo'lyapti 1.92 millionga teng bo'lyapti. Yes, Roger. Next one.
The next one then is the lead time. You're given that in the information. It says that it takes 2 months from the time the LC is established to when documents arrive, and then you release the documents immediately. So that's 60 days. And then the manufacturing cycle, you're given that information also. 60 days of raw materials, 15 days of processing, work in progress, and then 30 days of finished stock. So the working capital cycle there is 105 days long. So 60 days and 105 days. Let's calculate then the LC line first. 1.9.
Okay, let me go.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
Let me go over it, okay?
Yeah.
So,
Oh, you've gone muted, Shakbaz.
bizda lead time deb aytilgan, ya'ni lead time bu akkreditivni o'sha chiqarish muddati bizda 60 kun tashkil etyapti, ya'ni 60 kun davomida hujjatlar topshirish va o'sha hujjatlarni ko'rib chiqish, akkreditivni chiqarish va 60 kun tashkil etyapti. Ya'ni keyin undan tashqari mahsulotlar kelganigacha yana 60 kun ketyapti bizda va work in progress, ya'ni u mahsulotlarni ishlab chiqarish uchun, ya'ni u materiallardan foydalanib tayyor mahsulot ishlab chiqarish uchun bizda yana 15 kun va 30 kun vaqt ketyapti va общий bizda umumiy qilib aytganda 105 kun bizda o'sha mahsulotlarni tayyor qilish uchun aytyapti. Bu o'sha hammasi berilgan informatsiya, case studyda hammasi berib o'tilgan. Yes, Roger.
So then we know then the purchases are 1.92 million under LC for Singapore. So 1.92, the LC line is for 60 days. So 60 over 360 gives you an LC requirement of 0.32 million. And then for the trade finance component, financing the working capital cycle, that's the raw materials, work in progress, and finished goods. That is 105 days long, 60 plus 15 plus 30. We can calculate the trade loan as being the purchases figure, 1.92 multiplied by 105 days over 360 days equals 0.56 million. And then we can add together the LC line and the trade line, 0.32 million and 0.56 million, to give a total of 0.88 million. The total import requirement for this customer to support his Singapore purchases is 0.88 million. Shakbaz?
Okay. Akkreditivlar uchun kerak bo'ladigan, ya'ni akkreditivlar uchun kerak bo'ladigan summa, biz summani birinchi hisoblab ko'rishimiz kerak. Bu o'sha 1.9 million ko'paytirilgan 60, chunki 60 kun davomida o'shaning uchun va bo'lamiz 360 ga bizga o'sha akkreditiv uchun ketadigan, akkreditiv uchun har oy to'ladigan, har oy akkreditiv orqali to'laydigan summamiz bu o'sha 0.32 million tashkil etyapti. Savdo qarzi bizga, savdo qarzini hisoblashimiz uchun o'sha mahsulotlarni kelishi, mahsulotlarni ishlab chiqarish va tayyor holatga keltirish uchun ketadigan kun bizga 105 kunni tashkil etyapti. O'shaning uchun 1.92 ni ko'paytiramiz 105 ga bo'lamiz 360 ga va bu teng bo'ladi 0.56 millionga teng bo'ladi. Trade loan, ya'ni savdo qarzi. Umumiy qilib hisoblaganda bizda 0.88 bularni qo'shamiz va qo'shganimizda chiqadi 0.88 millionni tashkil etadi umumiy kerak bo'ladigan mablag'. Yes, Roger.
Any questions on that one at all?
Agar savollaring bo'ladigan bo'lsa, bemalol savollarni berishlaring mumkin. Bu case study bo'yicha. I guess there is no questions.
If not, then we can go to the second question, which is here, Slim Skirts. Now this customer is importing and exporting, so you're going to need to calculate import and export line. You're given all the information there that you're required in order to be able to calculate the facility. Maybe Shakbaz, you can go through it and give a quick translation.
Yes.
And I'll give you then another 5 or 6 minutes to have a go at this second exercise.
Okay. Keyingi ikkinchi case study'mizda aytib o'tilgan, ya'ni SSL degan kompaniya bu o'sha hozir bir minut. Ya'ni SSL degan o'sha kiyim-kechak ishlab chiqaradigan kompaniya hisoblanadi va o'sha bizni bank, ya'ni sizni bankingizni mijozlaridan biri hisoblanadi. Tasavvur qiling, siz hozir kredit, ya'ni kredit menejerisiz, ya'ni kredit beradigan odamsiz o'sha o'zingizni bankingizda va dekabr oyi o'sha Travis Fernando degan odam, ya'ni SSLni finansiy direktori siz bilan maslahatlashyapti, o'sha ya'ni sizga aytyapti biznesni oshirish va savdosini 15% ga oshirish uchun oshirishini aytyapti va siz buni bilasizki, to что o'sha savdo aylanmasi, ya'ni siz bilib turibsiz, shu savdo aylanmasi 5 millionni o'tgan yili 5 millionni tashkil etgan mahalliy valyutada va sotib olingan narsalar bu savdo aylanmasini, ya'ni o'sha оборотini amalga oshirish uchun, ya'ni поддержка qilish uchun, qo'llab-quvvatlash uchun sotib olingan sotib oluvlar bu 3 millionni tashkil etgan mahalliy valyutada. Travis, ya'ni o'sha finansiy direktor sizga yaxshilab tushuntirib o'tdi SSLni savdo muddatini va import tomonidan 25%, materiallarning 25% ochiq balans orqali import qilinadi mahalliy importyorlardan va 60 kun repayment muddati orqali va qolgan 25% Turkiyadan import qilinadi va akkreditivdan foydalanish orqali. Ya'ni ikkita qolgan 25%, qolgan ya'ni 50%, ya'ni materiallarning qolgan 50% Xitoydan olib kelinadi va bunda ham akkreditiv ishlatiladi. O'sha 30 kun ichida to'lab berishni, ya'ni nakladnoydan ko'rsatilgan 30 kun orqali 30 kun ichida to'lab berishi inobatga olgan holda. Va siz bilib turibsiz, что hujjatlar odatda bankka yetib boradi. O'sha akkreditiv chiqargandan keyin 30 kundan keyin, akkreditiv chiqarilganidan 30 kun qilinadi. Ya'ni document to product based deydi, ya'ni hujjatlar o'sha berilgan document recollection, ya'ni dokumentlar kolleksiya dokumentlar orqali va 30% Amerikaga jo'natiladi. Document against acceptance, ya'ni hujjatlar подтверждениеga asoslangan holda. Birinchisi document payment, ya'ni hujjatlar to'lovga asoslangan holda, ikkinchisi bu hujjatlar o'sha подтверждениеga asoslangan holda. Qolgani eksport qilinadi Yevropa ittifoqiga va 60 kunlik muddat bilan akkreditivlarni ishlatgan holda. Siz bilib turibsiz va siz bundan xabaringiz bor, Amerikada va Singapurda vaqtlar farq qiladi va 15 kun tranzit muddatni tashkil etadi. 15 kun tranzit muddatni tashkil etadi. Yevropada bo'lsa bu 30 kunni tashkil etadi. Hamma yuboriladigan mahsulotlar bu o'sha dengiz orqali jo'natiladi va yoki okean orqali, ya'ni kemalardan foydalangan holda jo'natiladi va butun ko'rsatiladigan o'sha nakladnoylar konkretno o'sha SSLni bankerlarni qo'lida bo'ladi. Va sizdan hozir so'ralyapti bu yerda qanaqangi import va eksport qulayliklarini kombinatsiyalarini siz bu mijozga rekomendovat qilardingiz, aytib o'tardingiz. Yes. So Roger, I've translated that. So we're going to wait a couple of minutes of the team in order to them to understand and to analyze the
Thank you,
case
Carlos.
study. All right.
That's great. Yep, thank you. This is almost finished now. So this is the last
Yes,
exercise.
yes.
Thank you. Okay, a couple more minutes. Okay, let's go over it.
Okay.
So this one is a little bit more complicated because there's 3 suppliers. I guess it's a little more realistic. But let's start with the basic numbers. Purchases are currently 3 million, that's given, but they're increasing by 15%. So purchases become 3.45 million for the next 12 months. And we have a combination of some local supply, imports under Site LC, and imports under Usance LC. And Shekboz, I'll just let you cover that.
Okay. Aytib o'tganimizdaqangi 3 million ya'ni import qiladigan, ya'ni sotib oladigan narsalari, ya'ni mahsulotlari, materiallari 3 million tashkil etyapti. Va finansiy direktor bizga aytdiki, to'g'ri ular 15% ga oshirmoqchi bu nimani keyingi yilda, bu ya'ni sotib olinadigan materiallar. Va bundan kelib chiqadiki, bizda 3.45 million mahsulot import qilinadigan bo'ladi va bizda 3 ta hozir eksportyorimiz bor. Va bittasidan biz ishlatyapmiz hisob raqam ochish orqali. Ya'ni aytyapmizki, o'sha 25% materialda hisob ochish orqali mahalliy ishlab chiqaruvchilar tomonidan yetkazib beriladi deyapmiz. Qolgan ikkitasi akkreditatsiya orqali. Yes, Roger.
So then for the Site LC purchases, that's 25%. 25% of the 3.45 million would give you 0.8625 million purchases under Site LC per annum. And now what we need to do is see how long the LC lead time, stock holding period, manufacturing period is. It's 30 plus 30 plus 30, so it's 90 days. So we can calculate the import LC, under Site LC, as being 0.8625 multiplied by 90 over 360, giving us a total requirement of 0.216 for the imports under Site LC?
Import, ya'ni Site LC import qilayotgan paytimizda o'sha sayt akkreditivlardan foydalanib biz ko'ryapmiz o'sha 25% materiallar kelyapti bu orqali. O'shaning uchun 25% biz ko'paytiramiz. Anaqani 3,45 millionni 25%ni topamiz va 90 ko'paytirib 360 ga bo'lganimizda biz 0,8625 million chiqadi, chunki o'sha 90 kun muddatni bizga olyapti. Ya'ni aytib o'tilgandaqangi o'sha mahsulotlar kelguncha va ishlab chiqarilishi stok period hammasi 90 kun olyapti va undan keyin 0,8625 ko'paytiryapmiz o'sha 90 ga va 360 ga bo'lganimizda 0,216 million kelib chiqyapti va bunda biz shuncha import liniyasi bizga sayt akkreditivi uchun import liniyasi 0,216 millionni tashkil etyapti. Yes, Roger.
So then we can calculate for the China imports. Imports under China LCs are 50% of the 3.45 million, which would give us 0.1725 per annum of purchases from China under a 30-day LC. We know that the LC lead time, the stocking period and the manufacturing period are 90 days. So 1.725 multiplied by 90 over 360 gives us a total of 0.431 for the China LCs. And we can add the site LC together with the China LC to give us a total import requirement of 0.647 million. Shahbaz? Shahbaz, you're on mute.
Keyingi ya'ni 25%, 50% mahsulotlar, ya'ni 50% materiallar aniqroq qilib aytganda Xitoydan kelyapti va Xitoydan o'sha akkreditiv ishlatilgan holda import qilinyapti. Buning uchun biz topishimiz uchun o'sha 50%, ya'ni 3,45 millionni 50%ni topamiz va bizga bu 1,25 millionni beradi va mahsulotlarni olib kelish, ishlab chiqarish va tayyor holatga keltirish uchun bizda 90 kunni tashkil etadi va o'shaning uchun biz 90 ga ko'paytirib, ya'ni 1,725 millionni 90 ga ko'paytirib 360 ga bo'lganimizda 0,431 millionni tashkil etadi va umumiy import liniyasi, ya'ni bizdan so'ralayotgan umumiy import liniyasi bu 0,647 millionni tashkil etadi yoki boshqacha qilib aytganda 647 mingni tashkil etadi. Yes, Roger.
So that's the imports covered. Then we need to look at the exports. We know that the exports or sales are currently 5 million. They're increasing by 15%, which gives us 5.75 million projected sales for the coming 12 months, of which 40% is to Singapore under a DP collection and 30% is to the USA under a DA collection. Singapore, then let's calculate Singapore first. 40% of 5.75 million equals 2.3 million. 2.3 million of sales to Singapore under a DP collection, and we're told it's 15 days to collect the money from Singapore under a DP collection. So 2.3 million multiplied by 15 over 360 gives us almost 100,000, just under $100,000 or whatever currency we decide to use. So that's Singapore. Then USA. Sales to the USA are 30% of 5.75 million, which would equate to 1.725 million of sales to the USA. However, the USA sales are 30 days DA, and there's a 15-day transit period for the documents and the payment. So that becomes 45 days. 30 days plus 15 days equals 45 days. 45 days 1.725 multiplied by 45 over 360 gives us a total of 216,000. We can then add those two together, 0.96 and 96,000 plus 216,000 to give us a total export line requirement of 0.312, 312,000. In reality, you probably will round it up to make these nice round numbers more simple, looks better. But basically, you can satisfy yourself that if the customer trades on these terms, that is the size of the facility that he requires. Now, one more thing I will say before I pass back to you, Shahboz, is you'll notice Europe is under confirmed LC, no facility required. Why is that? And the answer to that question is because for Europe, because you're confirming the LC, you will use bank lines, not customer lines. Because the transaction will be booked against the bank line, you do not need, the customer does not need a facility. So therefore, the customer does not need a credit line for confirmed LC transactions. So Shahboz, I'll let you cover that.
Okay. Eksport liniyasi tomonidan qaraydigan bo'lsak, ya'ni mahsulotlar sotuvi ham 15% ga oshirish plani bo'lgani uchun biz o'sha 50 ni ko'paytiramiz, 50 ni 15% ga ko'paytirib topishimiz kerak. Ya'ni topgan paytimizda o'sha ya'ni 5 va export requirement bizga o'sha 5.75 tashkil qilayotganini bildik. 5.75 ya'ni 5.75 millionni 40% Singapurga, 30% Amerikaga va qolgani Yevropaga jo'natiladi. 40%ni Singapurga birinchi hisoblab olamiz. U agar 40% Singapurga ketadigan bo'lsa, unda 2.3 millionni tashkil etadi va Singapurni tranzit periodi faqat 15 kunni tashkil etyapti va Singapurga o'sha document to payment, ya'ni document to payment kolleksiyasi orqali jo'natilyapti. O'shuning uchun faqat 15 kunni bizda tashkil etyapti va bu 2.3 ko'paytiramiz 15 ga, boramiz 360 ga, bizda bu 96 mingni beradi. Va undan tashqari bizda o'sha Amerikaga 30% ni jo'natayotganimiz uchun 1.725 million chiqdi, ya'ni mahsulotlarimiz 30%. Va bunda uni ko'paytiramiz 45 ga, chunki bizda dokument подтверждение yo'lini tanlaganimiz uchun buni o'zi 30 kunni oladi va 15 kun tranzit bilan 45 kunni beradi. O'shaning uchun 45 ga ko'paytirib 360 ga bo'lyapmiz. O'shanda bizda chiqib kelyapti 260 ming chiqib kelyapti va Yevropaga bo'lsa o'sha подтверждение qilingan, ya'ni tasdiqlangan akkreditiv orqali jo'natganimiz uchun hech qanaqangi qulaylik yoki imtiyoz bizdan talab qilmaydi. Chunki unda bank liniyasidan biz foydalanamiz o'shaning uchun va umumiy eksport liniyamiz bizga kelyapti o'shanda 0.312 million. Yes.
So any questions on that? Second exercise.
Agar savollaring bo'lsa, ikkinchi mashq uchun savollar berishlaring mumkin.
If not, we'll move on to the final couple of slides. So, now this approach, just a summary of this approach. It's a very transparent approach. You work with the customer to understand his trade cycle, and you then calculate the facilities based upon the information he gives you. So both sides agree that this is a good approach because it can be seen and proven that this is the correct amount of facility. So transparency. Second one, generally priced below the overdraft. You would price trade facilities below overdrafts because they are lower risk. There's an opportunity to lend and borrow in foreign currency because if the customer is importing or exporting in foreign currency, most likely interest rates will be a lot lower if you use the foreign currency interest rates. This is a much more disciplined approach in terms of tracking the customers' purchases and sales and stock holding periods. So it's a disciplined approach, which is good for the customer. Because it's lower risk, the bank should have more credit appetite. And you'll note from the last exercise, the slim skirts exercise, that as the customer's sales grow, so does the facility grow. So for customers, they get more working capital, more trade, are able to grow their sales and generate more profits as the facility increases, as their business grows. And of course, we've reduced the risk of fraud because we've used trade products. So clearly, to me, this is a win-win solution, win for the customer and win for the bank. Shakboz?
Umumiy oxirgi xulosa qilib aytganda buni ya'ni savdoni moliyalashtirish produktini asosiy qulayliklari va foydali tomonlaridan biri bu birinchisi o'sha oshkoralik, ya'ni umuman yuqori ko'rinish, ya'ni ko'rinib turadi hamma narsa, hech qanaqa narsa yashirincha bo'lmaydi va undan tashqari narxlari odatda o'sha overdraftdan past narxlanadi va undan tashqari xorijiy valyutada olish, ya'ni moliyalashtirish yoki o'sha moliyalashtirish olish imkoniyatini beradi va undan tashqari o'sha riski kam bo'lgani uchun bank ko'proq kredit berishni boshlaydi va undan tashqari mijozlar uchun va undan tashqari ko'proq aylanma mablag', ko'proq savdo o'sish, savdo sotish darajasini ko'paytirish uchun ko'proq foyda xohlagan mijozlar uchun bu turdagi produkt juda ham foydali hisoblanadi va savdo oshgani sari qulayliklar oshib boraveradi va undan tashqari firibgarlikni oldini olish, firibgarlikni kamaytiradi bu savdoni moliyalashtirish produkti.
Thank you. So that basically concludes today's session. I hope you found it useful. I think for the middle market, the small, medium market, this is a very good approach in order to calculate facilities and get the right level of facilities in place. So I think we're scheduled for another session same time next week. And we'll send you the material ahead of time. In the meantime, we again appreciate your feedback. So Amrutha will reach out to you for that. Are there any final comments or questions from anybody?
Bu o'sha bugungi seminarimiz oxiri hisoblanadi. Agar qanaqadir savollaring bo'lsa, tushunmagan savollaring bo'lsa yoki qanaqadir takliflaring bo'lsa, bemalol berishlaring mumkin. Qisqasini qilib aytganda, TFP ya'ni savdoni moliyalashtirish juda ham qulay hisoblanadi. O'sha o'rta va kichik banklar uchun juda ham qulay va arzon turdagi programma hisoblanadi va produkt hisoblanadi. Keyingi hafta sizlar bilan ko'rishamiz xuddi shu vaqtda. Agar va nimalar haqidagi bugungi seminar haqidagi fikrlaringni kutib qolamiz. Agar savollaring bo'lsa, bemalol savollar berishlaring mumkin. I guess we get no questions.
Okay, that's good. Then let's close there. Wish everybody a restful weekend and look forward again to catching up next Friday. Thank you, everybody.
Bugun oxirgi seminarimiz oxiri. Yaxshi dam olinglar, sog' bo'linglar. Yes, thank you, Roger. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for your seminar. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.